one way I would tell you all to sort of think about pitching is really to focus on people. Stories about people really travel. I mean, of course, famous people travel farther, but if you can find something compelling about that founder story or that team, that's really the way that I would pitch that. I love TechCrunch, and it's done such an amazing job over the years on so many fronts. But one thing that I thought that we were starting to miss a little bit was a little bit more original reporting. And it's hard because you're all pitching us all the time. And I think I'd read recently that private market assets are doubling the growth rate of public market assets, and there's going to be something like $65 trillion in private market assets by 2032, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's really exciting. And to your point, yeah, I mean, the private companies are on a scale that we've never seen before. OpenAI at $157 billion valuation.
If somebody is coming out of college and they want to be a TechCrunch reporter or they want to be a really good tech journalist, what would you say to them? What recommendations would you give?
I don't think anything has really fundamentally changed. I think to be a reporter, you need to report. One thing that I think is different, obviously, is
Thank you all for coming. Please give a warm round of applause for Connie Loizos.
Thank you.
Who is so gracious to join us today, getting on a flight back to the West Coast later today. So really glad she could squeeze us in because it's fantastic to have her on stage.
Thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to be here, and it's really fun to see all these reporters and editors whose work I read religiously, and so thank you.
Yeah. So TechCrunch in some ways needs no introduction. I think everybody here reads it probably, if not every day, then certainly weekly. It has been such a big part of the startup and venture community since inception. And I think a lot of companies probably don't feel like they've really made it until they have, their TechCrunch article. But before we get into all of your work and background at TechCrunch, I actually want to start with Strictly VC, because I think maybe some people actually know you better from Strictly VC, and some people may not have a great understanding of what that brand and that business is, because you were actually building that in tandem with your journalism career and with your work at TechCrunch. And I think you've built an incredible community there, an incredible business and journalism brand. So I would love to hear about why you built Strictly VC and how that's kind of threaded into your work over the years.
Thank you. Let's see. I got into publishing first right out of college. I moved to LA and I spent a few years there. And then I decided I didn't love LA. And I had a friend from Ohio where I'd grown up who moved to San Francisco and was working for Yahoo and said, oh, there's this great outlet you should apply for. It's really hot, called The Red Herring. And so I flipped to San Francisco, got that job, and it started my career in Silicon Valley. And I went on to work for a number of other outlets, Dow Jones, Time Inc., the San Jose Mercury News, and then Thomson Reuters. And I was at Thomson Reuters for a number of years, actually working with Dan Primack, who I love. And Dan had a long-standing newsletter product inside of Thomson Reuters, and Fortune poached him. And once he left, that newsletter product, which I was helping with, had become sort of like more and more PE focused. And there were so many days where I just thought, this is just not relevant to half of our audience, at least. And so sort of out of frustration, like a lot of people who start something because they've got an axe to grind, I left because I wanted to create something that I thought, people needed and that I wanted to be reading myself. So I started Strictly VC about 10 years ago. And I just started, and it was sort of gaining momentum, and it was exciting. And then Alexia Tsotsis, now Alexia Bonatzos, the then co-editor of TechCrunch, sort of tapped me and said, we'd really like for you to come work with us here. And I wasn't really that excited about it because, like you, I liked sort of having my own business, and I didn't really ever want to work for anybody again. But everybody at TechCrunch was amazing and supportive, and it's a very entrepreneurial culture. And they said, you know what, if you want to just keep this thing going and run it alongside, whatever work you're doing for us, that's fine. And so that was actually the arrangement for many years, and it was great. And I'm still very thankful for that opportunity because there were lots of synergies. And then eventually last year, the head of Yahoo, Jim Lanzone, and Yahoo owns TechCrunch, called me up and said, I love Strictly VC. I love the community you've built. I also love your work in TechCrunch. And I would like for you to run both of them, essentially. And we want to acquire Strictly VC. So that's sort of how that whole thing came about.
Well, that was going to be my next question. But what I want to know is when you came into the editor-in-chief role, and you're also general manager, you had an interesting perspective because you had been part of the organization for almost 10 years, but you also had this separate company that I think I would assume gave you a little bit of an outsider's perspective as well. And I would love to understand what your kind of priorities were when you came in just about a year ago, and how you wanted to steer TechCrunch, for this kind of new era, and what you wanted to do first.
Sure. So the community aspect was important. It remains important. And I think you're seeing a lot of media companies now doing much smaller events, sort of on the same vein of Strictly VC. So Strictly VC is a daily newsletter for those of you who maybe don't know. And we also have events. And I started the events maybe in 2005. And it's sort of like, I've always pitched them as cocktail parties with killer content. And there's a few people in the headlines who people really want to sort of closer access to. So I thought it was important for TechCrunch to have something like that because we have this massive, wonderful, fun, boisterous event every year called Disrupt, but I thought this would be sort of a really nice complement to it, and we needed, I thought, like this boutique brand. So they are different audiences. TechCrunch is a little bit more founder-focused. Strictly VC is a little bit more niche-y, investor-focused, and so there's a crossover, but still somewhat distinct. So that was important to me. Also then, just in terms of taking the job. I mean, it wasn't a no-brainer because I did love having, this business of my own. But I couldn't turn down the opportunity because I love TechCrunch, and it's done such an amazing job over the years on so many fronts. But one thing that I thought that we were starting to miss a little bit was a little bit more original reporting. And it's hard because you're all pitching us all the time, and a lot of those stories are interesting, and so there's a lot of startups to write about and a lot of founders, but sometimes it's easy to get lost in your inbox. And so I've really sort of encouraged the staff, and they have responded resoundingly to doing a little bit more original reporting. That was definitely one of my mandates. Another thing was just sort of recalibrating the staff during the pandemic in San Francisco. I'm sure you've heard the news that everybody left. And that included a lot of people on TechCrunch's team. They went to Paris, New York, just Healdsburg, but out of San Francisco. So just creating more of a presence there, again, has been a priority. And we've hired some really great people whose work I hope that you are reading. And then last, we had this subscription product that caused sort of more of a sort of stir than I was expecting. But I needed to kind of figure that out. That was a big priority for me too coming in.
Are you able to talk about that at all, the subscription product? Because you sunsetted it, yes? What was the reasoning there? Why did that not make sense for you all?
So that was a hard decision, and we've definitely not sworn off subscription products altogether. It was sort of a case where TechCrunch has had a number of parent companies over the years, and 2 parent companies ago, it was the case that somebody said everybody across all these properties has to sort of throw up a subscription product, and we did that overnight, and I think we did a great job. But by sheer dint of how it kind of came together, it was a little bit of a mishmash, and so we had how-to information, but it was also exclusively where you could find our climate and our crypto coverage, and so the value proposition was a little bit tough, and also, again, by sheer dint of how it was created, it was costing us quite a lot of money, and so I just knew that there was going to be a much more effective way to do this. And TechCrunch packs a punch considering the size of the staff, and I felt it was really important for everybody to kind of be rowing their boats in the same direction, and it's been sort of a little bit less friction on the team for us all to be working on this front of paywall product, which finally is a little bit of counter-programming because everybody now has their content behind a website, behind a paywall. So I thought this is an opportunity for us to sort of get our ducks in the row, just ahead of hopefully, the market swinging back and advertising coming back. And I think actually it seems like that strategy is working.
Yeah. What is, in your view, kind of the ideal TechCrunch story these days? I think a lot of folks historically think of TechCrunch, they think of funding announcements, and I'm sure that still has a place. But what is kind of the identity of TechCrunch within the realm of tech journalism, in your view, going forward?
Yeah, I think covering startups is always going to be our bread and butter. And I think to your earlier point, I think it is really still a rite of passage for companies, and that's something that we don't take for granted. I'm so thankful that we are in that position. I know my colleagues are as well. That said, I think, again, original reporting, a little bit more focus on people-focused stories. I think when you are covering startups, you can get kind of lost in the tech. And as Dan Primack mentioned earlier, sometimes the tech can be really boring. So one way I would tell you all to sort of think about pitching is really to focus on people. Stories about people really travel. I mean, of course, famous people travel farther, but if you can find just an angle, if you do have a client whose company is, a boring enterprise SaaS type business, if you can find something compelling about that founder story or that team, that's really the way that I would pitch that. And that's sort of, that's what resonates with us when we're looking at our, inboxes or when we're talking with people. And so we're kind of a little bit more focused on people over as much product.
That's interesting. So characters, personalities, folks who can really add meat, pizzazz to a story and that the audience can kind of latch onto as individual characters. In terms of the business going forward, where are your priorities? Is it kind of a mix of obviously the kind of standard ahead of the paywall journalism that you all do, ad-supported events, you have podcasts. Is that the pie? Are there other things that you're thinking about exploring? Do you want to expand the events business? I would love to just understand, kind of the revenue drivers and what you're concentrating on.
Yeah, a lot of it is sort of TBD. I mean, we have a lot of ideas, especially for the second half of 2025. I think right now we just feel like the lines are going in the right direction. Readership is growing, ad sales are growing. We just came off of a really successful Disrupt where we had more than 10,000 people and lots of great coverage, and it was just a really, really great event. We are going to host a number of Strictly VC events. I just had one here in New York a few days ago with Mark Laurie of Jet.com and now Wonder, who's a really interesting guy, and Bryn Putnam, who founded the company Mirror, that fitness startup, and who, by the way, is starting another company. She wouldn't tell me as much as I would have liked to know about it. But so more events. We are also interested in some things that we don't do currently. So again, we're interested in subscription products. We're exploring those. Sort of relatedly, we are interested in, we'd gotten rid of contributed pieces. A lot of those were great, but there was a lot that's not great. It's really hard to find a great piece, and we were spending a lot of time and energy kind of sorting through what was coming to us and working with contributors on sort of perfecting their stories. And given this sort of increased focus on the quality of what we produce, we decided to push some of that stuff into sort of more sponsored content, which I think is working because a lot of that content is sort of more appropriate there. But I think we are interested in bringing back some of the voices that our audience craves, but just sort of in a new form. But I'm not really ready to talk too much about that just yet.
I completely understand. You're a year in, there's plenty to still figure out, and you've already done so much. So I get that there are still things to be untangled and yet to be announced, but I appreciate you giving us even that insight. So my next question is sort of around any advice that you have for reporters, especially kind of aspiring tech reporters who are coming up in this environment. And things are changing, your strategy has changed, you're looking for stories that are a little bit different than maybe what TechCrunch looked for a couple years ago. If somebody is coming out of college and they want to be a TechCrunch reporter or they want to be a really good tech journalist, what would you say to them? What recommendations would you give?
I don't think anything has really fundamentally changed. I think to be a reporter, you need to report. One thing that I think is different, obviously, is AI. And so I think that, commodity journalism is a goner. AI is never going to replace original reporting. So you've just got to get out into the world and spend time with people, coffee meetings, phone calls, cultivate sources over time, cultivate relationships with all of you. And that's always been the case. And I just think it's becoming more and more important that people focus on, that sort of original viewpoint and point of view.
Right. So the gumshoe reporting, not getting lost in your inbox, not looking at the press releases, not maybe taking too many hints from really smart PR people like me, but doing a little bit more original sourcing and that kind of thing, and finding scoops. What do you think the future holds for tech journalism in general? Like, how do you view TechCrunch's role in terms of the broader ascendance of tech? Obviously, I think certainly in this presidential election, it has come to the forefront of, I think, the national conversation. Companies like OpenAI are really arguably becoming the power centers of the world, maybe. And it's not like it was, in 2005, when this was kind of a fun little industry and almost niche. How do you think about TechCrunch's role in that context going forward?
I think it's such an exciting opportunity, honestly. When I got into this business, it was before 2005, the red herring in the late 90s, and it was teeny tiny, and it was very male dominated, and it was very much a cottage industry. And so the fact that it's taking over the world now is just kind of mind-blowing. I think I'd read recently that private market assets are doubling the growth rate of public market assets, and there's going to be something like $65 trillion in private market assets by 2032, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's really exciting. And to your point, we've got the private companies are on a scale that we've never seen before. OpenAI at $157 billion valuation. You have SpaceX, which is reportedly trading secondary shares at a $250 billion valuation. Also, it's just, pretty wild to me that these VCs who we've been following and had at our events and know fairly well are suddenly, actually shaping the U.S. government in real time. The fact that these guys are sort of at the center of global geopolitics is pretty crazy. So it's exciting. Our sort of remit has just grown, and the opportunity for us to cover things is ballooning. And I think we couldn't be sort of better positioned. We've always covered innovation at every stage, meaning, from two-person startups through groups inside of, big companies like Meta and Amazon. But we are very well known for covering the business of technology at private companies and the players behind it. So I think we're really well positioned.
Yeah, and you make a good point. It's not just about tech. As you mentioned, it's about private assets. It's about this entire world that the public cannot access, and about which information is often very hard to come by. Yet its importance within the global economy, within finance, has grown, exponentially over the last 2 decades. So it's also you all playing that role in kind of illuminating that asset class as well. Quick question. What are your dream interviews or dream stories? Anybody you would love to get on stage at Disrupt who you haven't been able to get, or any kind of deep stories that you would love to do?
Gosh. Well, I will say one of my favorite people to interview is Sam Altman. We've talked a little bit. You heard Dan and Alex talking about this. Being able to, reporters respond to the same things that VCs respond to, which is the same things that potential employees respond to, which is great storytelling. And so somebody like Sam, who, could sell, ice to an Eskimo, is so fun to talk with, because there's a lot of people in this industry that do have big egos that are sort of somewhat dry, somewhat cerebral, somewhat self-promotional. So that is a little bit tough. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody that springs to mind who I haven't been able to talk with who I'd love to. I mean, it's such a privileged position to get to talk to the people that, we do get to talk to. One of my favorite interviews, which was sort of random, was getting to talk to Conan O'Brien a few years ago. I've been a super fan since I was a kid, and he was amazing and made it so easy. I was terrified, and it was
In what
it was
context
a highlight.
was that? Is he investing?
Actually, he's an amazing business person. He had started up his own, Team Coco company after getting sort of elbowed out of the late night show, and he grew it, and I think he sold it to Sirius for something like, after I talked to him, but he was already building up this podcast empire at the time, and I kind of wanted to talk to him as an entrepreneur, and I think he sold it for, 100 million plus to Sirius soon after.
I had no idea that Conan was also a titan of tech and media.
Renaissance man.
Yeah, Connie, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
Please, warm round of applause for Connie.
Thanks,
Loizos.
everybody.